Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Monk Chat. So this evening with my venerable brother Ajahn Kobilo, tuning in from the West Coast, and I am Bhante Sudaso, tuning in from the East Coast. And I see we have a number of friends already checking in from various places around the world. And so welcome, everyone. And currently there are no questions in the live chat, so this may be the shortest monk chat on record. So this may be good evening followed immediately by good night. So if no questions appear in short order. So once again, this is an opportunity to ask absolutely any questions whatsoever related to Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. And as long as it's at least vaguely related to Buddhism, either me or Ajahn Kovilo will do our best to give you an answer. So questions can also come from the monastery residents here, by the way. And Ajahn Kovilo, if you have any monastery residents, they can also ask questions.
Okay.
Okay. So
I'm not on the West Coast. I'm still up with Bhikkhu Bodhi at Chuangyen Monastery.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Right. Yes. And on that note, we do have one question for you. Gita Jnana asks, Ajahn Kovilo, how did you enjoy the retreat with Bhante Bodhi?
Yeah, it was wonderful. So Gita is speaking about this past weekend. Bhikkhu Bodhi had an online retreat going over the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, the first discourse of the Buddha. And yeah, it looked like there were, between 100 and 200 people tuning in. It was a 4-day retreat over the Independence Day weekend. He called it a Interdependence Day retreat, which I thought was kind of funny. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. Bhikkhu Bodhi, of course, can speak very deeply to any, certainly any Pali questions that people have. And even though I'm living here, I still asked questions. I'd say each, there were morning sessions and evening sessions. So all total, maybe, 8 different sessions through the weekend, something like that, 6 or 8. And I asked questions, for all of the first 3. And then on the 4th one, I started feeling like maybe I was being too kind of pulling, I've got him here and I can ask all the questions I want, and I do. So yeah, I would put my hand up and then I'd lower it. And I'd put my hand up again on the Zoom screen. And so yeah, I really loved it. Bhikkhu Bodhi is amazing. And yeah, it's kind of amazing that there aren't more monks and people who are coming to visit him at Chuangyen Monastery here in New York. So it's myself and another monk named Mangala Bhikkhu. And yeah, we get to go on walks with him 3 times a day. And I've asked him, probably a dozen questions every day. And regarding the Dhammacakka Sutta, yeah, I really enjoyed it. It's probably my favorite sutta. And yeah, I think I took notes. Yeah, there were a few things which I hadn't heard before. Let's see, Bhante was able to go through the commentary, the Atthakatha, and the sub-commentary, and pull some different resources from that. So like one useful thing from the commentaries which Bhikkhu Bodhi pulled out is the 3 types of suffering which are elaborated from the list of the truth of dukkha. So those 3 types of suffering mentioned in the commentaries are dukkha, viparinama dukkha, and sankhara dukkha. So
that's actually from a sutta in the Anguttara Nikaya, as I recall.
Really?
So it's actually not a commentarial invention. It's from the Anguttara.
Right.
But it's not explained at all in that sutta. It's just mentioned kind of offhand without any explanation.
Yeah, and maybe what the commentaries do are show how the, jatipi dukkha, jarapi dukkha, all these different aspects which are listed in the Dhammacakka Sutta, how those pertain to those 3 different levels of dukkha. But yeah, for people who don't know, and Bhante, please feel free to jump in here. The dukkha is the pain of having, basically the pain of having a body. So the suffering of just this embodied existence. The viparinama dukkha is the second type of dukkha, is the pain or the discomfort or the suffering of change. So non-association with the liked, association with the disliked, not getting what you want. These things are dukkha for people who are unenlightened. These are people who are, for us, who still have attachments to our likes and dislikes, and then we suffer when we don't get the things we want. And then the last type of dukkha is the sankhara dukkha, which even arahants experience. This is the one aspect of the dukkata lakkhana, the dukkha as it appears as one of the three characteristics of just the inherent, almost like the physics of the world, how that expresses itself as dukkha, as kind of unstableness of all things. Like in the Buddhist conception of things, like this notebook is dukkha, and this computer has a characteristic of dukkata in the sense that it's there's friction, there's compression. So it's a slightly different meaning of dukkha than you get in the rest of the Four Noble Truths. But yeah, do you have any thoughts on that, Bhante Sudaso? Have you thought much about those three types of dukkha?
I haven't, and actually, I found the distinction between viparinama dukkha and sankhara dukkha a little bit obscure. Those two seem to overlap to some degree, in that what is it that makes sankhara unpleasant seems to be related to the fact that they're subject to change. They're not stable. They're not permanent. They're not reliable. They're insubstantial. So that seems to overlap quite a bit with viparinama dukkha. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've actually never thought too much about those three categories of dukkha. I tend to think of dukkha just in the more general sense of the unsatisfying nature of all things, which is directly connected to their anicca and anatta nature, that they're impermanent and impersonal. Mm-hmm. Therefore, they're not capable of providing true happiness. Mm-hmm. Anyway, we're starting to get some questions showing up, so I think let's move on to some more questions. The next one, Bhavani asks, what is the difference between thoughts and dreams? So maybe Ajahn Kovilo, do you want to take this one as well?
Sure. And maybe you can correct me, Bhante, but there is a sutta in the Samyutta Nikaya which relates one of the five aggregates exactly to dreams, I believe. Do you remember which one of the aggregates that is?
No.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in one sense, you've got, many different Buddhist writers, monks and not, written, in sutra collections and not, relating life to a dream. So like thoughts are like dreams in a way. So speaking about dreams in like a metaphorical sense, that thoughts are like dreams. They appear as dreams, or the world is just a dream, in the sense that any way that we conceive it, the truth of the world is always other than that. So in terms of thoughts, in a Western conception, of course, of things, thoughts are what we do while we're awake, and dreams can be considered, maybe you can consider it like the thoughts that are taking place as we're asleep. And yeah. Do you have any further thoughts, Bhante?
I think that actually kind of pins it down in that, I would say that dreams are just a kind of thought. They're a kind of thought that appears when we're asleep. But that also, fundamentally, you can say that anyone who's not fully enlightened is dreaming all the time, which would be why the Buddha describes an awakened being as awake, because they're not dreaming anymore. They're not sleeping anymore. So the rest of us are asleep, and only Buddhas and Arhants are actually awake. So in that sense, everything perceived through an unenlightened mind is a dream.
Yeah, and I think it might be useful just to make clear that that's kind of a that's a simile, really. It's there are like brain states. There are states of the brain that are happening when one is asleep that are usually correlated with dreams, which are not associated with normal waking thought processes. But I think the comparison is very apt and interesting to think about. If you can relate to your anger as a dream, it's just something that you've made up. Like your whole story about that person is just as real as what you thought about last night when you were a dinosaur or whatever. So
yeah. And the next question, Nilan asks a question that we get asked about 3 times a week, which is, what made you decide to become a monk? So maybe Ajahn, we could each give a very short answer to this one. So in my case, what made me decide to become a monk was that I wanted to be happy and I wanted to understand the nature of reality. And those 2 questions turned out to both have the same method of answering. And that method is Buddhist practice. And the deepest and most complete form of Buddhist practice is monastic life. So for me, it was quite a natural decision from there. Ajahn, what's your thoughts on this? Why did you decide to become a monk?
Well, I sat a 10-day retreat, and basically on that retreat, I saw that my mind was totally out of control, but that it could be trained, and that when it's trained, it can experience like really profound levels of peace, regardless of whether there are thoughts or not. So, and then extrapolating from that principle, like I really need to give myself to this training because that seems like it's leading towards a very different, qualitatively different type of happiness.
Great. Next, Roy asks, does the sound of silence have an underlying mental texture, or is it more neutral like the breath? I don't actually use that meditation method very often, in fact, quite rarely. So maybe Ajahn Kovilo, I think you've probably had more time with it than me. What are your thoughts on this question?
Well, I haven't used this word mental texture before, but what it does bring to mind is something which Tan Nisabo quotes Ajahn Kachana as saying that the nada sound is like the auditory equivalent of the aloka sanya, the perception of light. So as the perception of light is to the eye faculty, so the nada sound, and if people don't know what that is, it's the sound of silence. So basically this constant, high-pitched bing kind of going on all the time if you tune into it. And that's the nada sound to the ear is like the perception of light to the eye. And I do find that it can really bring mental clarity. If I tune into it while I'm already paying attention to the breath, it can stabilize the mind and bring some crispness to the mind, which is interesting. It's like a fresh salad kind of feel to it. So the mental texture of like romaine lettuce, freshly sprayed kind of thing. So crispy texture, I'd say.
That's a wonderful answer. I've never before heard the sound of silence analogized to romaine lettuce.
No?
So that's no, I mean, that's brilliant. Maybe you could write a book called The Crunch of Lettuce or something.
Yeah, I don't think that'll happen, but
So next, Kumu asks, in the Majjhima Nikaya, it mentions throwing away leftover alms food where there is no greenery, or to drop into water where there is no life. Why is that? Well, briefly speaking, it's saying that if you're going to throw away leftover food into nature, make sure you're doing so in a way that's not going to harm any living beings. So, for example, if there's a pond of fish and you dump some rotting food into that pond of fish, then you might kill the fish. That guideline is about making sure that we respect other life forms and that we don't do anything which might obstruct their life. So in Buddhism, we practice being considerate of all living beings, not just our fellow humans, but also all of the non-humans that we are aware of. So going an extra step of really considering how are my choices affecting animals and insects and spirits and everyone that inhabits this world with us. And I would recommend extrapolating that principle farther than just throwing away leftover food. But actually, everything that you do, you should be considering, is this going to damage the environment or contribute to the suffering of animals or insects in some way? So also, for example, spraying pesticides on your lawn is going to kill a lot of insects, which there's actually no point in killing them. They're just living out their lives in their own way. So even things like that, I would say we should be considerate of other forms of life. Yeah. Ajahn, you look thoughtful. Do you have thoughts on this?
Yeah, I'm curious. I mean, there is the sutta where the Buddha praises, if a monk with the leftover food that's in their alms bowl, they, wash it out with some water and then take that leftover rinse water with that bits of food in, and then pour it into like I think the word is a pond. I haven't looked at the Pali recently, but pouring into that's meritorious. Like if you think, may the beings in this pond eat this food and be well, that is even dana, that is even generosity. All the more so if you give food to a human or something like that. What's your thoughts on the distinction?
Thank you for bringing that up, because the distinction here, I think, is between, on one hand, carelessly throwing away leftover food in a way which might harm living beings, versus carefully discarding it in a way that it might feed or sustain living beings. And actually, what comes to mind is that in Japanese Zen monasticism, this is actually ceremonialized, where the water that's used to wash out your bowl is, then you take it and you chant a little verse which is saying, I'm offering this for the nourishment of other sentient beings. And you carefully pour it out outside somewhere. Again, with the thought, like, may this go to feed and sustain some other sentient beings. So it's the attitude of offering, so considerately offering your leftovers to another being, as opposed to carelessly throwing it away in a way that might be harmful. So that, I think, is the difference there.
Yeah, good point. Good points.
Then next, Gurgol asks, would you please share some thoughts on attending retreats online as contrasted with in person, in view of making the most of the opportunity? So I don't think I've ever attended a retreat online. Ajahn Kovilo, do you have thoughts on this?
I have. Well, I attended the Bhikkhu Bodhi retreat this past weekend, which is a 4-day retreat, and then I attended a I think a 3-day Stephen Batchelor retreat earlier this year. And
you took a Stephen Batchelor retreat.
One of my classmates suggested that I take it, and it was interesting. It was interesting. Say that.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, in person, I guess it really depends on how extrinsically versus intrinsically motivated you are. If you're someone who is an upholder, so basically you hold on to rules well. You set a timetable for yourself and then you keep to it. If you're someone that can do that, then it doesn't really matter so much whether you are doing a retreat in person or online. Whereas if you are someone who is extrinsically motivated, who gets motivation from seeing other people meditate, and there's a group kind of almost peer pressure, positive peer pressure to sitting, then it's really a world of difference. And yeah, you can get a whole, environment from just being in a room where, which has been devoted to people meditating there for years, possibly decades, at some meditation centers. Like, that's the sole purpose of this room, and that's been the sole purpose of this room for decades. It kind of does something to the room. It's hard to say what, but it does do something. And but yeah, COVID time, what are you going to do? Lockdown. Yeah, you want to make the best with what you have, and yeah, don't let the best be the enemy of the good.
Yeah, I agree. And Aya Brahmavara, so welcome. Good to see you, Venerable. Aya Brahmavara says 3 different words in the scriptures for mind or consciousness: mano, chitta, and vijnana. I'd be grateful for your help in distinguishing between the 3. So it's actually interesting you asked this, because just earlier today, one of the residents here had asked a similar question, and we talked a little bit about it. So my thoughts on it are that so mano and chitta are often used almost interchangeably. Where there can be a distinction made is that mano refers to the mind in general, so the knowing faculty, the knowing ability. Whereas chitta is often used to refer specifically to mind states. So for example, in the 4 Satipatthana, so Chittanupasana is awareness of states of mind, emotions or characteristics of mind. So chitta seems to sometimes be used to refer to particular characteristics of mind, whereas I don't believe mano is ever used in that way. I think mano is always used just more generally to mean the mind, that which knows. And vijnana, which is consciousness, vijnana is normally used to refer to the 6 sensory domains. So awareness of the visual world, eye consciousness, awareness of the auditory world, ear consciousness, and so on. So eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind. There are a handful of places in the suttas where vijnana appears to be being used in a more broad sense, though this has been a point of debate for about 2,500 years as to whether there is such a thing as a primordial vijnana, which is not connected to any of the 6 senses. So that's a whole other debate, which might take quite some time to get into. So I think for now, we'll just go with the standard answer of the six sensory consciousnesses. Anyway, those are my thoughts off the top of my head. Ajahn Kovilo, do you have anything you want to say on the subject?
I don't think so. I think that was a good summary.
Okay. Next, Rick Thorne says, I am in a time of transition. I have maintained a Zen practice since 1978. Congratulations, that's a long time. My Buddhist practice has grown tremendously since I dedicated myself to Theravada Buddhism from 2013 to the present. For 26 years, I've been on the front lines of a 12-step program, sharing the Buddhist path with those in recovery. However, the opportunity to show up in love and service has changed. My health has gotten much worse, and there's a lot of resistance to this path where I now live. Is it skillful to be content with living a primarily solo practice supported by online opportunities, or should I push myself to find others to serve in person? Ajahn Kovilo, what do you think?
I mean, you know your situation better than we do, but you can do a lot online. I mean, it's amazing. I mean, just living here with Bhikkhu Bodhi. I mean, he doesn't really leave the monastery that much. Certainly hasn't during COVID time, and can just do amazing service, amazing teaching. Online. If you're not, doesn't really sound so much maybe like you're in a teaching role, but if in a 12-step program, yeah, if you are a mentor or a sponsor, yeah, you can do so much. I mean, I think just, to some extent, even since AA started, like, well, not since when it started, but telephone service has been a huge aspect. Kind of this remote distance service has been a huge part of those 12-step programs for decades, many decades. So yeah, and I don't think it's less valid for that reason. And yeah, if your life is going well and you're not really finding much support, really kalyana mitta around you, then yeah, it's probably better to to some extent, there is a place for avoiding people who are detrimental, who are not supportive to your spiritual practices. So yeah, really, I'd say pay attention to that and don't try to throw yourself into an environment which is not necessarily helpful or actually unhelpful. So.
Yeah, and in the Kagavasana Suttas, the Buddha is quite clear that it's better to have no friends than to have harmful friends. So yeah, sometimes our only really reasonable option is to focus on solo practice. But you might also look and see if it is possible for you to move somewhere where there is a supportive community, where there are people that you can practice together with. Pretty much every major city in the entire world has Buddhist temples, except in some religiously intolerant countries. But in most of the relatively tolerant countries in the world, there's Buddhist temples to be found. I think every major city in the US has at least one and usually many Buddhist temples. So you can at least be connected with people who appreciate Buddhism. And that can be really nourishing. So it's really, really worth taking the time to go and see monks and spend time with other Buddhists. Even if they're from a different culture or a different country, even if they don't speak your language very well, there's still something incredibly nourishing about just knowing that you both appreciate the Dhamma and you both respect the Sangha. So Kumu, referring to the three kinds of dukkha, Kumu says, from another Dhamma talk, pleasant feeling and attachment to it by raga equals viparinama dukkha. Unpleasant feeling plus aversion to it equals dukkha dukkha. Neutral feeling plus moha equals sankhara dukkha. Ajahn Kovilo, thoughts?
I didn't hear that. Yeah, what I heard from that talk was that, I think he was referencing the shorter discourse on questions and answers. Do you remember that part, Sudaso, when the Buddha is talking about the underlying tendency towards, or the underlying condition which leads to craving is pleasure, or the underlying feeling which leads to aversion is dukkha, and the underlying feeling tone, underlying vedana, which leads to delusion is neutral feeling.
Mm-hmm.
I can't.
I remember that, but it's not connected with this three set, like dukkha, viparinama, and sankhara dukkha. It's not connected with this three set. It's just connected with the standard pleasant, unpleasant, neutral set.
Yeah, that's my understanding as well. Yeah, I don't see how this would, this would align. No.
Okay, so we'll move on to the next question. Paul asks, do you have any advice on how to deal with papancha, mental proliferation, whether in meditation or everyday life? I find that my mind is often distracted and restless. Well, you're not alone. So this is actually a very common problem. Mental proliferation, first off, recognize it's an activity that we engage in. So if there's just a bunch of noise in the background of your mind, well, that's not papancha. That's just echoes from past mental activity. Papancha is when you're actually actively producing unnecessary mental noise. It's when you're actually actively making noise with your mind, or producing stories, or getting wrapped up in ideas or imagery in the mind. And there is a place for that. So, for example, if you're planning an event, then you do need to generate ideas. But most of the time, it's not necessary. Most of the time, you can let your mind be silent. So if you see yourself starting to proliferate in your mind, you can just gently tell yourself, not right now. Like, now is not the time. I can plan things later. I don't need to do this right now. So just gently telling yourself, like, not right now. And come back to your body. Just keep coming back to your body. Mindfulness of the body is an incredibly effective way of cutting through mental proliferation. Walking meditation can be very potent for this, or mantra practice of any type can be very potent as well. Yeah, mostly just reminding yourself that papancha is 99% useless. And the other 1% is only useful under very specific, controlled times and circumstances. Ajahn Kovilo, any thoughts?
I do find there's a relationship between, say, like bodily posture and papancha. Specifically, a certain type of papancha, maybe like related to like computer use. So fortunately, I'm not in a situation where, I have to use a computer all day or even for large parts of the day. But it's very easy to see, and I felt it in myself when you just start getting like sucked more and more gradually, like sucked into the screen more and more, like hunched over, and it's almost like the papancha energy is like, like reeling you in, reeling you forward. And if you can come back to the upright posture, as it says in the beginning of so many suttas, the Satipatthana Sutta, the Anapanasati Sutta, and breath meditation, you make the body uju, which is upright. And when you've got that physical balance of body, then you can notice when the mind is kind of going out through the eyes, in a sense, or that's a kind of, again, a descriptive way of talking about it. Of course, the brain, or there's nothing actually coming out of the eyes, but that's kind of the momentum. There's this forward pull. Yeah.
Okay. And Rick asks, when I focus on the nada sound, I experience nausea. Is this unusual? Again, I don't normally use it. So Ajahn Kovilo, can you take this one, please?
Well, there is, tinnitus or tinnitus is a medical condition, which I don't have it. I have relatives who do.
I think we just lost Ajahn Kovilo.
Oh, I can still hear you.
Oh, yeah. Okay. The feed just came back. Okay. Sorry, could you please repeat your answer, please?
There's a medical condition called tinnitus or tinnitus, which, one might think that is just like an amped up version of the nada sound, but I think actually tinnitus or tinnitus is actually it's a painful feeling, whereas the nada sound is either a neutral feeling or a neutral contact, or a pleasant contact if you're able to pay attention to it in a way which is nourishing. But it's also for most people, the nada sound is something that you really have to tune your attention to pay attention to it, to hear it, unless you're someplace very quiet. You really have to tune into it. Whereas, say, tinnitus is something which is overbearing, and so if the nada sound is causing you nausea, then I'd say don't pay attention to it. There are all sorts of other meditation topics you can pay attention to, and tinnitus is a unpleasant, it's unpleasant experience, and I think there are some treatments for it, but Yeah, if you have a choice, if it's not being forced upon you through tinnitus, then I'd say just don't incline your mind in the direction of the ear door to pay attention to that.
Okay, thank you. And just apologize to our viewers. Our internet connection is a little unstable, but we're doing the best we can. So, okay, so I'm being reported that the audio feed is still okay, but please let me know if there's any problems. So Roy asks, do monks who choose to never lie down, for example, Ajahn Sumedho or Ajahn Amro, do this for an extended period? Does it take a toll on the body? Can you lie down and stay awake to achieve the same goal? So the practice of not lying down is normally done only for specified amounts of time. And it's actually, optimally, it's done by people who have very strong samadhi, where their meditation is so strong that they actually don't need to sleep at night. So it's not meant for people who need a good solid 8 hours of sleep every night, because you're just going to wind up falling asleep sitting up, which usually will lead to you crumpling over and damaging your spine and your back and your neck. So it's not really recommended for ordinary people. It's meant for people who have very advanced meditation. And even then, it's normally done for specified periods of time. Though some people do wind up doing it for the rest of their life if their meditation is really advanced. Yeah, does it take a toll on the body? Again, if your meditation is incredibly advanced, no, it doesn't. But if your meditation is not very advanced, then yes, it's going to be very hard on your body. Can you lie down and stay awake to achieve the same goal? So the practice is actually called the sitting practice. So nesajjika literally means the one who sits. So lying down, you would by definition not be doing the sitter's practice. So I would say no. No, that's not the same thing. Yeah. Ajahn Kovilo, any thoughts?
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I hadn't heard that Ajahn Sumedho had done it for a long time. Pretty much anyone in, Thai forest monasteries in the Ajahn Chah tradition, and in Thailand, and also, some of the monasteries in the West, do this on a maybe a weekly basis, each observance day or each the lunar quarters. Basically, you stay up all night and are meditating in a group setting. Ajahn Amaro, I think he did it for 3 years or something as a young monk. Ajahn Jayasaro, I think he did it for 4 or 5 years. Reverend Hung Sher, I think did it for something like 20 years. And I think for Reverend Hung Sher, it did take a toll on his body. He was also, for a period of that, he was like living in a van, which didn't have like proper, like he kind of like had to do sitters practice like hunched over because the roof was too low, is what I've been told. So yeah, don't do your sitters practice in a van if you have a choice. But it's an impressive project. I mean, yeah, people who do it, I'm impressed. Ajahn Pasano has been doing it, on a regular basis for years. But yeah, I agree with Bhante Sudaso that yeah, you don't want it to make you dislike meditation, and you don't want it. What it can do for some people is if you push yourself and you're not getting, Dhamma piti, Dhamma sukha, so pleasure and joy and rapture from the practice, is that it can actually just, you're just becoming sleep deprived. And then when you come to meditate, you just fall asleep. So this is a common thing for people who do take it on for, say, like the 3 months of the range retreat, which is somewhat common. They'll just, you see them in a public meditation event and they're just constantly nodding, because they're thoroughly sleep deprived. So I think one useful rubric for paying attention to how much you can cut down your sleep or not is the quality of your mindfulness during the day, and just paying attention to that as your kind of guiding star. If your mindfulness is going down during the day, then maybe you need to get some more sleep.
Yeah, I agree. Also, just as a general rule, if you're falling asleep a lot during your meditation, then it might be that you're just not sleeping enough. So sometimes sleepiness in meditation has a very simple explanation, which is that you need to sleep more. So Rick asks, how much pain and exhaustion is skillful when applying right effort? How do we tell when we are pushing too hard or when we are not applying enough effort? Ajahn Kovilo?
The Buddha doesn't correlate dukkha or sukha, so suffering or pleasure, so pain and pleasure, with wholesome and unwholesome mind states. There are types of suffering which actually lead to the increase of wholesome mind states, and there are types of experiences of suffering which lead to the decrease of wholesome mind states and the increase of unwholesome mind states. So take the increase or decrease of wholesome and unwholesome mind states as the measure of how much. So how do we tell when we are pushing too hard and when we are not applying enough effort? You can tell if you're pushing too hard, in that on the whole, wholesome states are decreasing and unwholesome states are increasing. But that said, I mean, you read that, of course, that's the definition for people who are aware of these things of right effort, is the increase of the wholesome, decrease of the unwholesome. But really, when you're talking about a broad concept like working too hard, or there are many different mind states that you're experiencing, and some of them may be wholesome and some of them may be unwholesome. So say, for instance, this thing about staying up at night, pushing your sleep limits. You might. So I push my sleep limits. So as I'm staying up past 3 a.m., say even midnight, 1 a.m., 2 a.m., my energy faculty, or my faith faculty might be increasing. Like I'm awake and I'm doing something which ajahns in Thailand have been, and all over the world, starting Buddha goes, even the Buddha would occasionally praise this practice. So I've got faith, and your faith is increasing to some extent, but your mindfulness might be taking a hit. Your concentration might be decreasing. Your wisdom and discernment faculty might be decreasing. So it's kind of like you have to be looking at this whole spectrum of wholesome and unwholesome mind states, and be trying to get a overall general sense of what is the net positive or net negative, kusala, akusala, wholesome, unwholesome, deficit versus plus. So are you in the red, or are you in the whatever the opposite of the red is in that simile? I don't know economics, so apologies.
Great, thank you. And Paul asks, do you have any suggestions as to which time of day is best for lay people to do formal meditation? Is it best to wake up very early to meditate? Well, realistically, you should be meditating as much as reasonable. But I would say that, it's better to plan on meditating first thing in the morning. So wake up early. If you're groggy, have a little bit of tea or coffee. Do a little bit of chanting, maybe the 3 refuges and 5 precepts and the recollection of Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. Then do some meditation, however much you have time for, or however much you're able to do. 10 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour. Then also later in the day, you can do some more meditation as well. So in the afternoon or the evening, you can do more. But I don't recommend only planning on doing meditation in the evening, for a few reasons. One is that you'll often find that you wind up putting off your evening meditation and then not doing it. Like you're like, oh, well, 6 o'clock is my meditation, but I really wanted to visit my friend or watch this show, and okay, I'll do it at 7. And 7 o'clock, you're like, well, but I just had dinner, and 8 o'clock, and then 8 o'clock, and then you go to bed, and you never wind up actually meditating. So better to do it first thing in the morning because then you know that you'll get it done. But also because it sets the tone for your whole day. If you start your day with refreshing your precepts, reminding yourself of the triple gem, and doing some meditation practice, then you're starting your day with a clear commitment to Buddhism and a clear commitment to a wholesome mind, a pure mind. And that will set the tone for your whole day. And you'll find that throughout the whole day, you're a little bit wiser and a little bit kinder and a little bit more mindful. So yeah, early morning is the best time. And then also do other times throughout the day. So during the very brief time that I was a lay Buddhist before I went to the monastery, I would meditate during my lunch break. I actually usually didn't eat lunch now that I recall. I would just meditate instead. So I would get up in the morning and do some meditation, have breakfast, go to work. Then during my lunch break, I would meditate for 45 minutes or so, and I would go back to work. And then after work, I would sometimes meditate again in the evening. But as I said, often one thing would lead to another, and I wouldn't get around to any evening meditation. But that was okay because I had already done the morning meditation and the midday meditation. So yeah, first thing in the morning is best because then you know that you won't be missing your meditation. Okay, and Dave says, I used to be an addict and I found the Magandiya Sutta helped me understand things. In order to understand and let go of attachment, do you feel one should refrain from sensual pleasure altogether? Ajahn Kovilo, what do you think?
Yeah, so for people who don't know, the Magandiya Sutta is a discourse in the Majjhima Nikaya, maybe Majjhima number 75. But it has some very striking similes, probably some of the most memorable similes for the compulsiveness or the addictive tendency which basically sensual pleasures can induce. And the similes are given relating to lepers. So these are people with a very debilitating I mean it manifests in the skin, but I think it's all throughout the body of basically fingers can fall off, and it's your whole body's just itching. It's and the similes are like someone who is a leper, who has leprosy. They might take a hot iron or a firebrand and like rub it on their skin to kind of cauterize the surface of their skin so that they wouldn't feel all the pain and the itchingness. And the Buddha says, okay, there's that. But then say his friends and his relatives take him somewhere to a doctor and he gets his leprosy treated. Would he still take a hot iron and press it on his skin? And they say no. Why would he would do that? And it's the same way with unenlightened beings. Like we relate to sensual pleasures. So the sensual pleasures are like the hot iron, and according to the Buddha in this simile, in that we keep kind of indulging in them because it gives a modicum of pleasure, whereas in actuality it's a harmful process. So that's a very easily kind of jump that you can see this metaphor to addiction, to drug use. Anybody who's been addicted to any substance, really. It's not just alcohol or narcotics, or it can be food or anything. You just think that more and more, the more I get it, the more I get this next hit, the more I take this next bite of sandwich, the more I take this next drink, the more satisfied I'm going to be. But then it's really the case that you just are burning more and more. You're increasing the internal combustion that's going on. So I agree with that. It helped me as well see things clearly. In order to understand and let go of attachment, do you feel one should refrain from sensual pleasure altogether? No, because food is a one type of sensual pleasure, and you can't totally forego food. And yeah, the Buddha was strategic. He wasn't. He wanted us to take a path which is, yeah, applicable and practicable for a long period of time. It's enduring, and it can live with us. We can live with this practice for a long period of time, for the rest of our lives, or for the rest of many lives. Until we attain enlightenment. But yeah, be practical, and yeah, do what you can. If there are realms of sensuality which you can clearly see are addictive and leading to your own suffering, really, then stay away from those. So with certainly with alcohol and narcotics, and people who have a tendency at you kind of know what your triggers are, and respect that. Really, really respect that. But yeah, it can, you can see it boomerang. Yeah, if you like, oh, I'm just not going to enjoy anything. I'm just going to eat, dry bread and old water or something like that. You're just torturing yourself, and if you're not ready for that, if you're not experiencing pleasure in the old bread and water, whatever. So yeah, do what you can, know what your triggers are, and yeah, try to keep all of that in the forefront of your mind.
Okay. Next, Piyal and Indira ask, is there any particular reason why the 10 perceptions in the Girimananda Sutta are arranged in that way? For example, why is breath meditation put at the end of the list? I believe this perception on breath can lead to all other perceptions at some point. Any suggestions? Well, actually, I have to say that I don't really feel like the 10 meditations in the Girimananda Sutta are arranged in any immediately visible, logical fashion. I'm actually just looking at them again now, and I still don't see any clear pattern to them. So it starts off with the perception of impermanence, the perception of non-self, the perception of unattractiveness, the perception of danger, the perception of abandoning, the perception of dispassion, the perception of cessation, the perception of non-delight in the entire world, the perception of impermanence in all conditioned phenomena. That one is also sometimes translated the perception of the undesirability of all conditional phenomena. And then the final one is mindfulness of breathing. So yeah, I don't really see any clear pattern here. So there's a handful which are insight perceptions in particular, like impermanence and not self. There's some which are about getting the mind to let go of, getting the mind to see the drawbacks in conditional phenomena. And then there's finally mindfulness of breathing, which you're correct. Actually, mindfulness of breathing itself tends to also, if it's done according to the 16-step meditation, it also includes impermanence, dispassion, cessation. Doesn't necessarily include some of the other perceptions mentioned. But yeah, I actually don't really see any clear reason why it might be arranged in that order. Ajahn Kovilo, do you have any thoughts on this?
I mean, one kind of counterbalance is the Satipatthana Sutta, where it's the first exercise that you see in mindfulness of the body, which is the first Satipatthana. I think you've got like, depending on how you count, like 6 or even over 10 different meditation subjects for mindfulness of the body. And the first one is mindfulness of the breath, which comes before even the postures and the different bodily positions and the 4 elements, etc. So yeah, it could be just a particularity about Girimananda himself, the sick monk, or Ananda, who was passing on the message. Yeah, there's just so much that the Buddha would have been so attentive and attuned to his listeners' needs, that, and then we just can't know that. It's impossible for us to know all the details of what the Buddha knew at the time. So yeah, maybe it was all these things are leading up and, culminating with breath meditation. And that's just what Gary Mananda needed for his sickness to abate.
Okay. Next question, Roy says, when I meditate, my mind goes from manic to lethargic and back. Sounds like many people who meditate. I've been trying to follow Bhante Siddhaso's guidance to more actively pull out of lethargy. But if I just follow that lethargy and try to be aware while my mind sinks, interesting things tend to happen, which include deep and surprising ideas and thoughts related to my day job. Presumably, you would not encourage this, but any guidance on this topic? You are correct. I do not encourage this. In fact, I think you're just wasting your time. No, do not let your mind sink into lethargy, no matter how many interesting thoughts appear. In fact, interesting thoughts appear because you're starting to daydream. So I'm actually fully aware of this. So until fairly recently, it used to be my main hindrance in meditation was drowsiness. And yeah, when the mind is starting to fall asleep during meditation, it will produce the most wild and fascinating and interesting mental objects, some of which actually even seem to be applicable to real life, and some of which is just like fun, wild, crazy fantasies, and some of which is just utter meaningless nonsense. But you're not meditating, you're just wasting your time. So no, I do not encourage this, no matter how interesting or applicable those thoughts seem to be. Ajahn Kovilo, I see you nodding. Any thoughts on this?
Yeah. I mean, try walking meditation. Give more weight in your mind to walking meditation. If you want to, be doing, however long a day, half an hour or an hour, do walking meditation. If you're meeting with lethargy every time you sit down, especially perhaps in the morning, it's good to be training your body to be able to sit. It's, formal sitting meditation is a useful thing to be cultivating, in theory. But if in practice you do it and your mind just slumps and sloughs and just gets totally underwhelming, then change your bodily posture and do something to wake yourself up. Wake them up.
I would also say that if you have to pick between agitation and lethargy, pick agitation. And the reason I say that is because when the mind is agitated, at least it's aware. Whereas when the mind is caught in lethargy, the awareness is very weak and can quickly disappear. So just being aware of the agitation of the mind is slowly cultivating wisdom, whereas letting the mind sink into lethargy is not cultivating anything. It's just wasting time.
Yeah. Would you agree with this, Bhante, that being aware of lethargy is being spontaneously and brightly and acutely fully aware with clear comprehension of lethargy is that's a difficult practice. I mean, lethargy is the exact opposite. It's pulling you in the exact opposite direction of clarity. For people who are, have been meditating a long time or do have prowess in that regard, it is possible. You can be aware of it, but it's almost like the antithesis in a way for many meditators in certain stages of practice.
Yeah, and I should just give a shout out for lethargy in that it does have a quality of tranquility. But again, the danger is that the mind so easily loses its clarity, and you just wind up falling asleep and wasting time. So the challenge, if lethargy is your problem, the challenge is to keep the mind awake, and do whatever you can to stay awake. And then that peacefulness of lethargy will become a boon. And if your problem is agitation, then your challenge is to settle the mind and soothe the mind. And then the alertness of the agitation will become a boon. So it's a matter of trying to protect the positive aspect of whatever mind state you're in while counteracting the negative aspect of that mind state. So next, Vic asks, how do you define sati panya in your practice? So sati is mindfulness and panya is wisdom. Sati as mindfulness is awareness, awareness of what's currently going on. For example, awareness of your body, awareness of your feelings, awareness of your mind states, awareness of mental objects. Whereas panya is recognizing the true nature of phenomena, which is usually spoken of in terms of recognizing their impermanence, or recognizing their unsatisfactoriness, or recognizing that they're impersonal. They're not you. They don't belong to you. So you need mindfulness in order to have wisdom. There is debate as to whether or not mindfulness automatically includes wisdom. I would actually lean towards saying that mindfulness does not automatically include wisdom, but that mindfulness is a necessary requisite for developing wisdom. And also that in the Satipatthana Sutta, the Buddha does say that if one is practicing right mindfulness, then one is also cultivating the awareness of arising and ceasing, which means the perception of impermanence. Ajahn Kobilo, what are your thoughts? Satipanya.
I think this word, I don't think it actually occurs in the canon, or if it does, it's certainly not very common, but it is like it's a Thai compound word, satipanya, and which could be even like translated as like intelligence, like one's satipanya, one's intelligence. But another understanding of it is as like a term which does come up very frequently in the canon is the compound sati sampajanya, which means mindfulness and clear comprehension. And I think it's even used sometimes as a compound. So the same word so in English it would be like a hyphen, mindfulness dash clear comprehension. And there are places, certainly in the Abhidhamma, but I think even in the Sutta Pitaka, where sampanya is defined, or sampajanya and panya are seen as synonyms for one another. So sampajanya, they have the same root, which is nya, and sampajanya just has an extra sung, which means together with in front of it, which doesn't do that much. But sati sampajanya is basically like the clear, awake, bright knowing. And that, for me, that really is practice. For me, that's like that's exactly where practice is. If I don't have sati sampajanya, then I'm not really practicing. For me, that's like a catch-all term for right effort and right mindfulness connected. Right effort, right mindfulness, and right view to some extent. So it's, if I'm not awake and alert in that way, then I'm not really practicing no matter what posture my body's in.
Okay, and next question. Alex says, this is for you, Ajahn Kobilo. Did you benefit from Stephen Batchelor's retreat? Can the secular approach serve as a useful entryway for some?
I did benefit from it. I said that it was interesting in a kind of derogatory word, just because I was responding to your face, Bhante Sudasa, which was like in response to knowing that I went to the Stephen Batchelor retreat. I did find it interesting. It was a very secular retreat. Main emphasis of his teaching, of course, is on taking Buddhism into a secular setting, like de-religifying taking the religious implications from Buddhism. But that said, like the people who were on the retreat who I interacted with were very respectful, very sincere people, very sincere people, and that was good to see because it's kind of easy as a um, say yeah for myself, say as a young monk, I've got like a lot of zeal, and I come to the monastery and I'm like really into being a monk, and I'm still into being a monk, um, but this kind of like almost like dismissiveness of um, certain aspects, certain trends and strands of secular Buddhism. Like Stephen Batchelor has a famous book called um, Buddhism Without Beliefs. And like the common kind of joke that you hear about that book is, oh, is it Buddhism without beliefs, or is it beliefs without Buddhism? Is kind of the rejoinder. Or so can a secular approach serve as a useful entryway for some? I definitely think so. I mean, to some extent. Um, well, secular is an interesting term. If you mean secular Buddhism as it is taught by Stephen Batchelor, I think it can. Yeah, I mean, I've got a good friend who, is a very sincere practitioner, and he's just not ready to get on board with certain things which are commonplace in the canon, like rebirth. He can't yet take that jump. Um, yeah, isn't really inspired by monastic institution, etc. Um, but yeah, people change. I mean, I was, I think most of the people that come to a Abhayagiri monastery, weren't raised Buddhists, so were raised in somewhat secular settings in that sense. And the Goenka retreat, that was my Dhammador, and they're very secular in a sense. And if they hadn't been, if I had been introduced, if I had had Buddhism, capital B, like shoved down my throat, like at the first day of the Goenka retreat, I don't think I would have stayed. If I had been told I have to believe in rebirth from day one, even from year one, I don't know if I would have been interested. So I think it can. Um, I might have a different answer than Mate Sudasa, but that's my take. I think it could. I think it can, and it is a door for people.
Okay, thank you, Ajahn. And Ayabamavara asks, have you been able to do some Tudong practice, walkabout out in nature and doing alms round in all different places in the US? Ajahn Kovilo, I think you've had more experience than I have in this.
Yeah,
have
I'm
you?
curious if you had done any or much, but
I haven't done any wandering practice. I have done alms round in various places. Alms round I found is always successful. Every time I've gone alms round, with only one exception, but pretty much every time I've gone alms round, I always got more than enough food. Yeah, but I haven't done any wandering practice. Ajahn Kovilo, you've done wandering, yeah?
yeah, but for short periods of time, maybe like 10 days, 2 weeks, and mostly in California. So walking north on kind of paralleling Highway 101, and 10 days, 2 weeks. It's a good amount of time, and going alms round every day in small little towns. Being cold, walking a lot during the day, living with only the stuff that's on your back. I think any person who's into camping can see the benefits of that. So you see all the benefits that campers get, but the special characteristic that we get as monastics is that one of the things that we're carrying is our alms bowl. So rather than carrying food on our backs or coming into towns to buy food, we will leave our wilderness dwelling to come and walk alms in a town. And that's you're putting yourself in a very precarious position. You are walking 10, 15, 20 plus miles a day, using a lot of calories, and then certain times of the year in California, most of the year, cold, in Northern California, very cold evenings, and expending a lot of calories that way. And then, yeah, you come to some town that you don't know and nobody knows you're coming. And Americans don't know what a monk is. So they see you with this thing that looks like a drum and they have no idea where they place you in their mental models of the world. But so it's, yeah, and that precarious situation really lends itself to growing of faith, growing of endurance. You're able to do things which are hard to do. So yeah, it's a worthwhile experience, which I've done, and I intend to do more. I've done it with Tan Nisabo, who was going to be on this call, but it didn't happen with technical difficulties. But yeah, inspiring. And the people who gave alms are just random Americans of any religious creed that just see somebody and see that we don't have means to support ourselves and want to support us. So it's a beautiful thing, and you meet beautiful people in that way.
Great, thank you. And Danilo says, I haven't meditated much lately. How should one restart that practice? Just do it. Make a resolution and do it. Right now, like as soon as this monk chat is over, go and do some meditation. Just cancel whatever else you were planning to do after this and do some meditation instead. And then make a resolution that tomorrow morning you're going to get up at such and such time and do some meditation. And yeah, make a clear determination and stick to it. So ultimately, it comes down to personal resolution and taking your personal resolution seriously. And Danilo, as a follow-up, would you recommend any particular meditation? Well, I mean, I'm going to sound like a broken record because I always recommend the same meditations, which are mindfulness of the body, loving kindness meditation, contemplation of the six elements, perception of impermanence, silent illumination, and basically the same stuff I talk about all the time.
Bhante, can I ask you a question about that?
Yeah.
So there's a popular kind of habit forming technique in modern America called the 2-minute rule, which is suggesting that for a new habit or a habit that you've kind of gotten out of practice with, keep it at 2 minutes, or keep it at just do it for 2 minutes. Don't push yourself, because you might, 2 minutes is a doable number for many people for many things that they, are not yet in the habit of doing. And if you try to do more than that, there's this mental block that you just don't want to do it if it's, even like 5 minutes. Do you think for someone who's starting out a practice, is the 2-minute rule for meditation too small? Would you say that's, or would you, what's your take on that?
Well, my first thought actually is that in Tibetan Buddhism, when they do meditation training, they actually start with 3-minute meditation periods. So when, especially if teaching a new meditation technique or teaching to people who are new to meditation altogether, then they'll do 3-minute meditation periods. And the idea is that it's better to be focused for 3 minutes than to be spacey for 30 minutes. So the idea is you start with 3 minutes and then gradually increase from there. So that was my first thought. My second thought was that 2 minutes feels incredibly short. At least 10 minutes would be good. But maybe that's just because I'm used to meditating. So to me, even 10 minutes just feels like a flash of lightning. It's already over. So 2 minutes is a lot better than nothing. So I would say if it's a choice between 0 minutes and 2 minutes, then go with the 2 minutes. But I would also say if somebody is used to meditating and they used to meditate a lot and they used to meditate for 30 minutes or 40 minutes or an hour, then yeah, they should just do 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes. They know they can. So yeah, those are my thoughts. I mean, 2 minutes is better than nothing, but generally speaking, more is better. Then we have another question for Ajahn Kovilo. Dave asks, is secular Buddhism different from secular ethics? Also, do monks and nuns of different sects come together to contemplate topics and issues?
I don't know this term, secular ethics. Secular Buddhism, is, I'm not sure if the term was coined by Stephen Batchelor or not, but he's certainly one of the foremost proponents of it. But it's an interesting term because, I mean, secular, you look it up in the dictionary, and it literally means, the definition is like non-religious. So let's see, I mean, expanding on what that means, as I understand it, secular Buddhism is basically taking those things which are unambiguously not woo-woo, basically. So you can take the meditation, you can take ethics, you can take principles of generosity, but you're not going to sign up to believe in rebirth and believe in deva realms and hell realms and things like this. Whereas secular ethics, non-religious, I mean, the meaning of that, as I would understand it, is non-religious ethics. I think it's possible that secular ethics is a subset of secular Buddhism. But in a sense, you could say that Buddhist ethics are secular ethics. I mean, there's nothing especially Buddhist about the Buddha's moral principles, in a sense. I mean, they are specific in that he laid them out, but there's no like magic in not killing or stealing or not committing sexual misconduct or lying or taking intoxicants. So I think I'll have to look up this word secular ethics to give a better answer. And do monks and nuns of different sects come together and contemplate topics and issues? Bhante Sudasa, you might be the great monk to respond to this.
Yeah, it does happen. There's actually an event which happens once a year in North America for exactly that purpose. It's called the Western Buddhist Monastic Gathering. Advance warning, it's only open to Buddhist monastics. So if you're not a Buddhist monastic, then you're instantly disqualified from attending. But that's exactly what it is. It's meant for Buddhist monastics of all different traditions to come together and discuss various topics related to Buddhism or related to monastic life in the West. Last year it was a Zoom meeting. In previous years, it's always been in person, and I've gone a few times. It's actually a really lovely occasion. Also here at Empty Cloud Monastery, we again, prior to the pandemic, we would regularly invite monastics of all different traditions to come. And I personally find it incredibly valuable to have conversations about Buddhism with people from a wide variety of traditions and sects and lineages, because fundamentally we're all talking about the same principles, but often from different angles and perspectives, which can be very illuminating. And another thing also is that if one only spends time within one's little insular bubble of everybody from your exact same tradition and your exact same lineage, who uses the exact same words and the exact same perspectives, then it can actually be quite stifling and quite constricting of one's growth. So I've benefited tremendously from conversations with people who have had different training and different studies and different practices than me, within Buddhism specifically. So yeah, it definitely does happen. You also do get some monastics, of course, who are very sectarian and are only interested in their own lineage, and that's fine. That's their choice. It's just not my choice. So I quite enjoy a lot of cross-pollination between lineages. I found it incredibly nourishing to my own growth in the Dhamma.
There are also Christian Buddhist monastic gatherings, which I think similarly, if you're not a monk, you're not a nun. Sorry, can't go. Have you ever been to any of those, Bhante Sudasa?
Not specifically monastic. I've done some Catholic Buddhist dialogue programs in the past, and I actually always found those quite interesting. Generally speaking, I found Catholics get along relatively well with Buddhists. And there's some interesting overlaps between Catholic monasticism and Buddhist monasticism. And in fact, there's speculation that early Catholic monasticism was inspired by Buddhist monasticism. But yeah, I haven't been to a specifically monastic Catholic Buddhist program. I'd love to go someday. I haven't been. So Aya Brahmavara has a question for you, Ajahn Kovilo. Can you share news on Venerable Nisibo's current situation? I assume that's about his project to open a monastery.
Yeah, I wish he was here. Yeah, technical difficulties, but yeah, he is now in Seattle. I think this is his second week. He is, going on the alms round. Monday, he's going alms round every day, but Monday through Friday, he's going on alms in Pike Place, so kind of the heart of Seattle. And you can go to the website clearmountainmonastery.org, I believe. And yeah, you've got alms round maps, and he's teaching. I think there's like a weekly get together on Saturdays in one of the parks in the city. I think it's been moving around, but you can go and get the latest information on the website. But he's doing well. There are people. There's a Dana calendar. So although he's going alms round, sometimes people will sign up to come to the location where he's on alms to offer food. And so he's been getting enough food every day, which is great for a human being, monks included. And yeah, it seems like the Seattle Buddhists and Buddhist inclined people are really responding very well. Earlier this week, on 2 different days, he went around and visited various other monasteries that exist. So monasteries in the Sri Lankan tradition, Japanese Zen tradition, met with Chinese monk, Thai monasteries. So getting to know the lay of the land, meeting both monastics and lay people affiliated with these different centers. And yeah, just making connections. And he's a great connector. That's one of his very strong points. He's one of the most skilled connectors that I've ever met, and he's just such a nice person. He's very easy to get along with, and yeah, he's right now living in a hut in Port Orchard, I believe is the name of the area, and takes the ferry into Seattle every day, and then goes back. And yeah, he's living a nice secluded life in an area which is close enough to the ocean that he can go and visit there, and he can get enough walking and exercise. He loves exercise, loves movement, so walking. So he gets that, and he's doing well. So hopefully he'll be able to tap into another one of these monk chats, and if not, you can see him on the weekends. I believe he's giving a talk tomorrow, which will be streamed on YouTube on the forest tradition, specifically the teachings of Ajahn Lee.
Okay.
So yeah, thanks.
And the last question for the evening, Amaranta asks, can I have an almost monastic life living as a layperson, or is it impossible? It is possible. It is possible to have an almost monastic life as a layperson. It's difficult, but if you set up your life to be very simple and quiet with few duties and few distractions, have a simple job which is wholesome and which optimally doesn't require a lot of brain power, something which you can just do mindfulness of the body while you work. Don't have children, don't have a partner. And make a schedule for yourself. Make a schedule of chanting and meditation for yourself on your days off from work. Spend the whole day doing sitting meditation, walking meditation, and sutta study. Yeah, you can live an almost monastic life as a layperson, but I would ask yourself, why don't you just go to a monastery? It's a lot easier. If you want an almost monastic life, just go and live in a monastery. It's much easier than trying to do it on your own. So it's almost 9 o'clock, so I think we'll go ahead and end for the evening. There's no more questions showing up. So thank you, Ajahn Kovilo, for joining in for Monk Chat. And thank you to all the people who asked questions. And we'll see you next week. So please join in Wednesday, Thursday, Friday for our regular program, 8 a.m. Sutta study, 7:30 p.m. meditation and Dhamma talk. We also have some other events led by guest monastics on the other days of the week. So Aya Vimalanyani has been doing a sutta study series on Tuesday mornings. Tanisabo's been popping up on Monday evenings, I think. So keep an eye on the channel. There's always lots of good things happening. So we'll end the evening with 3 sadhus. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And we'll see you next time.